Welcome friends, welcome to 7 Days to Die, where I'm going to test some explosive stuff. We all know that, of course, when demolishers explode, when cops explode, any blocks around them take a bunch of damage. In this case, it was almost 3,000 damage there, and 2,500 there, and some stuff here that broke. But what about blocks that are behind blocks? I mean, they should be fully protected, right? But if you played the previous versions of 7 Days to Die, you know that they have had a lot of problems with basically explosions going through blocks. Less so when it's full blocks, but more so when you're having weird shape. Let's say you have an arrow slit. I put an arrow slit down like that. What if there's an explosion in front? Will it blow back past it, through it, into the block there? Well, what about if you have something like let's say a plate? That's a plate. If we stand up a plate, something like this, what if there's an explosion? Is whatever behind it safe? So I'm going to try that out and we'll see how that works in Alpha 20. I'll try a few different types of shapes, you know, plates, arrow slits, maybe I'll do half blocks, and of course full blocks. It's going to be impossible to go through and test all of them because, as you know, there are, and I'm going to see if I can see all of them here, 1,365 different shapes, so I'm not going to be testing all of them, but I want to test some just to sort of see if you have a very thin, medium size plate, whatever, how does that work as far as explosion? Because that really is important to know when you're making your builds. And if you enjoy this kind of test in 7 Days to Die, make sure you hit that like button. Of course, subscribe as well. But let's start off with something simple. We have the basic arrow slit here, and of course I made it out of steel so it doesn't keep breaking. And actually, let me get myself a nail gun, just so I can see what the damage is, if any. And let's trigger him here. He is on the block right in front of it. Do that. Bam! Of course. We do see damage here. I don't think we saw any damage behind it. Just get rid of these here. No damage. That's actually good news. Well done, Fun Pimps. I know this was an issue here, and of course I'm going to have to repair some of that as well. Let's try the centered plate. Let's see what happens when I... Oh! Don't move around. No, don't move. Can I nudge you forward? Is that working? Maybe if I shoot in the leg. Okay, that... Alright. Sorry. You have to go. You have to go. Let's try this again. Let's see. Stop. There we go. Just a plate. Protect. It actually does. Well, of course, things here are starting to fail as well. Let's take that out, and we see no damage behind. That's actually pretty good news. I thought maybe the plates would allow some blow through. I took the thinnest one I can find, which is the sheet. And we'll see if that protects fully against the explosions. Well, the sheets were taken out. What? Oh! 500 hit points. Oh, that's interesting. Well, that's interesting. I did not realize that. So steel sheet. Hold on. Oh, there's a tool eye as well. What about this? So this one has... Interesting. This one has also 500. I didn't realize that actually, that because if you look at the plate, and this is actually pretty important, if you look at the plate itself, if we take the actual plate and put that down, that one has the full 10,000 hit points. Just like a full block. But the sheet has only 500. Interesting that that's how they've decided to do it. I find that a little bit peculiar, but all right. It still doesn't blow through. All right, okay. Let's try this one. So this is a half plate. As you can see, it's centered. It doesn't cover the whole thing. So you would imagine that it would allow explosion damage to penetrate. And, well, of course, that one... No. Well, that was interesting. Let me just replace this a little bit. So this one doesn't let any through. And the reason this actually might be important is that it allows you to, because it has the full 10,000 hit points, you could actually use this as walls, and you could safely shoot through, and even if there is a demolisher explosion, it wouldn't actually take them out. Let's try a cop here. I'm a little bit interested in what happens when there's a cop, so we do need to cause him a load of damage here. One go this way. No, go this way. Okay, that might... Okay, alright, sorry, I'm gonna have to get rid of him. Let's do that. He was being backed up a little bit too much, which of course causes issues with it would be exploding and dealing damage behind it. Alright. Does the cop then do any damage through? Okay, so let's have a look. Oh, the cop. What? So the police officer does, but no. That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Let's try this again. Okay, we try that here. No damage. But the cop actually... So there's a difference between how the cop explodes and how the demolisher explodes. Because if you look here, the demolisher doesn't do any damage, but the cop does. We're going to try that again. I repaired them. And let's put down a cop. Like so. And let's just damage him a little bit. Okay. Let's see if he indeed... Now there was no damage here. What? Does it depend on how he's standing then? That could be it. Maybe it's depending on how he stands. Do that. He's right in, sort of right in front of it. Boom. Okay. Now it deals damage. Okay, so certain angles it might not. But how did... Again, let's go back to the demolisher. That find that a little bit peculiar. You would have thought that that would actually cause some damage. Oh, that one did. Ah, so it really... I wonder if they were slightly pushed into the blocks here. Hold on, let me refresh this. I'm trying another one, and we have plates here. And that one went through. It feels like sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. And I think this might be part of the reason why this has been confusing. And we do that again, we do like that. It does feel like sometimes it will actually go through. Maybe it's a height thing, or maybe it's a positioning thing of, let's say I put the demolisher here. Let's fix that up. Now you see he's sort of on this block. He is not on in this space. So if I then shoot him, right, he's still not moving. Okay. Okay, he's not dealing any damage, right? Okay, so let's see if I put him slightly behind, so he's inside this block, like so. I mean, he's standing right in that block, and I shoot him. That might cause damage on... It does, and let's throw that one. Nope. So what I think is happening here, and I think this is an issue that we had on previous versions as well, that if he gets into this space, it will basically penetrate. It's almost as if it checks to see that, hey, you know, he's standing on this block, and while he might damage everything around here, the explosion is radiating out from this block space, even if it's on this side of the wall. and that's causing the issue. So what that would mean then, let me reset this. If I build it up like this, so that it's at the edge, will that ever cause an issue? Let's see if he's right up to, I mean, he's actually literally slightly behind. Let's see if I shoot him here. What happens? Except for the floor breaking. That is still fine. So that does strongly imply that you have to avoid using blocks that are in the middle, meaning centered plates and stuff like that. Because now we had an explosion here, and let's try out with the cop as well, just to be sure. It seems to imply that as long as you don't use any blocks in the middle. He was exploding, but he was sort of behind, but it doesn't deal any damage. So it seems to have fixed the issue where it's going through as long as he's in a different block here. Because this time he was on this side, he wasn't in sort of inside the other block space. Let's try this again with sort of these half pole plates to see if, again, he's going to be in front. What happens with explosion damage? Does that cause an issue? He's sort of being pushed back. And now let's see, does that still penetrate? Again, you would imagine there would be some penetration. There seems to be none here. Let's try that again. I'll try that a couple of times, and we'll see how that actually goes. One more, and there was no damage behind. If we can get him right here, because he sort of moves around and staggers a little bit. No damage. Alright, now he's literally in front of the hole. Is that going to cause any damage through? It does not look like it. So as long as you're at the edge, using blocks like this would be definitely possible, because you can shoot through, you can melee through, some limited at least, but explosion damage will not go through. But what if you put poles? Poles is something that a lot of people have been using. I've now switched in the poles, and I'm going to put a cop here. He's right here. Good. Alright, let's reload. What happens here? Everything around at least is blowing up. This one also does not do any damage through, which is good to know. But I suspect if I switch this out to centered poles, and I usually don't use those. There are sometimes I do. See if we can get a centered pole, something like that. And let's put this one here. I would imagine if I spawn in a zombie cop here and I shoot him a little bit, because he's inside that block, I would imagine that it's going to cause damage on the blocks behind. And it does. So that seems to be the common theme here. That if you have a block that is covering the side where the zombie is at, you will not have the issue with explosion damage going through. But if you have blocks that are somewhere in, meaning they allow the zombie to step, actually I can go through here. Good. It allows the zombies to actually go through. You will not have the damage, and I would imagine that's the same for Demolisher. Let's set him off. I would imagine that it's going to hit the concrete wall, and it definitely does, because he's inside that block space. But if I take that out and I put that in, new wall here, and I put him right in front here, but he's not inside all these holes. Now that he's not, let's see if I can make sure he doesn't stagger. Right. Now I would imagine it's not going to cause damage. Yes, it doesn't cause damage. So with that, let's review what we have learned and discovered. It does appear that if you're using any blocks that is at the edge, meaning that zombies will not be able to walk into that block space, it will not pass through any of the explosion damage. The wall or whatever you have will block it, even if it's something as a pole. That will work very well. But if you have anything that, even if you have a full plate like this centered, it does allow the zombies to get into this space, which unfortunately then causes the damage to go through the wall, presumably because it's calculating the damage from this block space location. It doesn't care that something is in the block space that would prevent damage really from being transmitted, because something exploding here shouldn't go through. I mean, you would expect that anyway, but that's not how the game seems to be calculating. It simply says there's an explosion in this area and, well, there's nothing here, so I'm going to cause damage. Whereas if you're looking at this one, there's an explosion in this block and, well, the plate is in the way for it to go through to the next side behind it. And that's really interesting. The game has had these problems in the past, and maybe it's more of a feature than a bug. I think it might be something that is really difficult for them to code around, at least based on how explosion damage is working right now. It seems to work the same way for cops and demolishers. So in other words, whatever you're making builds and you want to avoid getting killed behind it, make sure that it's flush up to one side. Don't use the centered variants. And I definitely learned something. I could definitely envision using something like this, because you can shoot through, you can batch through, but there's no risk of actually suffering an explosion damage. And I've had some base builds in the past where there's an explosion damage taking place outside of the walls. I might have poles and everything, I guess, especially if you're using certain alignments of it, and I'm not keeping them in front, and the explosion actually kills me. But it seems that, at least for Alpha 20, and I can't speak for earlier versions because this is something I believe that has changed across the years, but this is how it seems to work in Alpha 20. So keep that in mind when you're making your base builds. Ensure that the zombies are outside of the block space and you will be safe, and so will your base, especially when you're trying to protect things behind it, such as it could be dart traps, it could be electric fences or trip bars and stuff like that. Just make sure that you don't have the zombies stepping into this area. You probably potentially could still have an issue with zombies being... Let's do that as a last test. Let's try this again. So I've now put these half plates again. Let's see if I put in a bunch of zombies that are sort of crowding in here. Does that ever cause them to... I push them in here. Maybe not. Okay, if I then shoot him, right, because he's sort of slipped into that block space. Does that cause him damage? It doesn't seem to do that. Well, we're gonna have a lot more. Whoa! Oh, that's a nice little somersault. So all of them exploded and no damage behind. Okay, all right. So maybe they fixed the issue where they sort of glitch in, because he was standing slightly into this space, but I guess because of the wall being flush here, it's still considering in front as far as damage penetration going. And I'll definitely take advantage of this in my base builds. See you next time, Survivor.
Special thanks to the great patrons supporting the channel. If you would like to join the vetted community and support these videos, do follow the Patreon link.